Okay, let's get started, everybody. So, today we're going to be drafting the basic skirt foundation. This is a foundation that is like the other foundations that we are drafting. It has no style, it's just got enough ease for trying on. It's not something you would want to just copy and not add any design ease to for someone who is going to wear it. So this is a foundation piece that you use to make other patterns from. All right, this is a pattern that is going to be drafted using the standard size 8. So let's get started. All right, so we're going to draft the front and back skirt. I have my paper cut just a little bit wider than what half of my hip measurement would be for my draft, and I have it about 22 inches long. And it doesn't matter about that whether it comes to a length that would be used for wearing, again, because this is a foundation piece. I'm going to take this and make other size 8 patterns from it. Okay, and I'll be adding wearing ease, design ease, and style lines, and zippers, and pockets, and whatever else I might want to do. Okay, so my paper is 24 inches by 23 and a half. Okay, all right, so let's get started. First thing I want to do is to fold my paper in half the long way. Okay, all right, so because I'm going to draft the front and back all on one side. Okay, all right, so I folded my paper in half. Now I can weight it down again, and I can start my draft. All right. Okay. So, first thing I'm going to do is make my side seam, or my center line to separate the front and the back down the page. So I'm just going to match it up exactly with that fold. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come down just a little bit, maybe about an inch or two from the top of the page, because I just don't like to start my drafts at the very top of the page. I'm not going to come down a lot because I want my pattern to be about 22 inches long. Okay, so this will be the top of my draft. Okay. This is going to be the front, and this will be the back. The next thing I'm going to do is measure down from this top line, which would be my waist, and I'm going to measure down on this center line, which is the side seam for my pattern pieces. I'm going to measure down my hip depth. So how far away from my waist is my hip, is the fullest part of my hip. So from the waist down to the fullest part of my hip on my model was 6 inches. So I'm going to mark this here, and then I'm going to square a line out on both sides. This is my hip line. Okay. And I'll put HL here for hip lines. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is go all the way down the draft from the waistline, the length of my draft, and I'm going to stop at 22 inches. Again, this is for my master pattern, or my sloper. So this is going to be my hemline, the bottom of my draft. Okay. Put that out of the way. This is my hemline, or the bottom of my draft, okay? The next thing I'm going to do is measure out from the back my back hip arc. Now, the hip arc is the halfway point. So if this is my side seam, from my side seam to the back, my center back would be my hip arc, okay? So from here to here would be half of my hip measurement, okay? Would be a quarter, I'm sorry, of my hip measurement, because my hip is divided by 4. So if I divide my hip by 4, I'm going to have 9.5, because my hip measurement was 38. So 9.5, and I'm going to add a little bit of ease. I'm going to add a quarter of an inch ease. You can add up to a ½ inch ease, but I'm going to add just a quarter of an inch ease here, okay? And I'm going to mark the same amount on the other side. If you're doing a custom fit, this might not be the same, okay? That would be a custom measurement. So you would measure from the center, you would have a front hip arc and a back hip arc, okay? It would be from the side seam to the center front here, and in the back it would be from the side seam to the center back, okay? All right, so 9.5, so which 9 3/4 once I add that quarter of an inch ease there. And I'm just going to true up my lines here, make sure they are nice and straight. Just a little bit out, a little bit further. Okay. All right. Okay. Once I have those lines, then I'm going to square a line straight up and down the back. So I'm going to use my big square to do that. And I'm going to mark that measurement from my waist down to my hemline, the bottom of my draft. Okay. Alright, I'm going to connect this line here with the hem line here. So now, this is my side seam here, and this is my center back, okay? This is my center back. So center back to side seam, that's half of the back pattern. And then I'm going to come to the front and mark my center front. Okay, and now this is my center front measurement. Okay, side seam to center front. So that's half of the front, half of the back, all right? All right, okay. So now the next thing I want to do is to work on getting my waist correct, okay? So from my center back into my, going towards my side seam, I want to mark my waist divided by 4 plus my dart intake. So dart intake is going to be the difference between the hip line and the waist. Okay, so if your hip is 10 and then your waist is 8, then you have 2 inches of extra fabric that would be up here or at the waist, and so we have to create a dart because we want it to fit here like it fits at the hip. Okay, so for us, our dart intake is going to be 1.5 inches. All right, 1.5 inches. Now, usually I don't like to have darts over 1.25 inches. I will divide them. So in other words, I would take that 1.5 inches and divide it by 2 and end up with 2 darts. But just so I can show you guys a basic draft, I'm just going to put the one dart there. So here's how we do it. So if I divide my waist by 4, I end up with 8 inches. But I have to add 1.5 inches for my dart intake. So there we go. See there? So if I do that, I'll come in here. And here is my waist, and I'll come over my 8 inches for my waist, and then I'll come over 1.5 inches for my dart. Okay, so now there it is. All right, I will do the same thing in the front. From the center front going towards the side seam, I'm going to have my 8 inches, and then I'll add my 1.5 inches to that, and here will be my waist, where my waist will end. Now again, I'm showing you guys the most simple way to do it. Then I'm going to take my curve, and you could take your hip curve and do this. This shouldn't be a really a curve that's really deep, you know, really curved in. This is a slight curve in this case. So right here to where this line is, it touches here, and then on the other side, let me make sure I get that right on that line, and then I'm going to flip my ruler over, and then I can mark my side seam in the back. Okay, so now this is my side seam. So now this little space here is where is not a part of the pattern. Okay, because this is my, from here to here is my waist divided by 4 plus my dart intake. Now the next thing I'm going to do is mark where I'm going to put my dart. So I'm going to start from here and measure over here and find the halfway point and mark it. Okay, another way you could do this is you could measure your waist, and you if I was going to put more than one dart, I would measure the waist and I would divide it up. And I like to use my tape to find my measurements. If I'm putting in more than one dart, I'm going to want to measure from the front out and start my first dart here. Okay, and then 1.5 inches away from that dart, I'm going to put my second dart. All right, in this case we're doing one dart to keep it simple, so I'm going to just divide my waist measurement here in half, and I've got 9.5, fold it in half, and there you go. If I mark it here, that's going to be my dart, and I can do the same thing in the front. Okay, from the front, I'm going to measure over and mark there. So now I have my center for my darts. So when you draft patterns or in pattern making, the front dart is always shorter than the back dart. Now we all know that when you have a dart coming into an area that is curved, like your bust, your waist dart and your bust dart, you have they cannot come into your bust radius, the area where you have the curviest part of your bust. And it's the same thing with your hip. Your hip, this is the fullest part of the hip, so we don't want a dart going into the fullest part here, because then we're going to have a pucker or a sharp point, right? All right, we don't want that. So in the front, I'm just going to make my dart 3.5 inches long. Okay. And then in the back, I'm going to make my dart 4 inches long. Okay. So there's a 1/2 inch difference. All right. 4 inches long. All right. Now I'm going to take my tape and I'm going to find my dart is 1.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is find 1.5 inches here and fold this in half. Okay, that's much easier than trying to do the math. All right, and then I'm going to mark that amount on both sides, and that will give me a dart that is 1.5 inches. So on one side of the dart, okay, and then what's cool about this tape is it stays, the little crease stays there, and then on this side, and then I'm going to do the same thing here. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and connect my dart legs. Now, I'm going to take my ruler and mark about where I think the halfway point is on my dart. So here, if I've got 4 inches, that's going to be here. And I'm doing that because these are large darts, 1.5 inches to me, and I like to have my, take my darts, and I like to contour them, especially when they're like this. And I'm finding halfway mark there and there. Okay, and then I'm not going to come in a lot. I'm just going to come in maybe right where I marked that in half, maybe just 1/8. Okay, okay, on each side, just 1/8. All right. So what I'm doing with this is just contouring my dart a little bit. I just don't want it to be so straight. Okay, so now I'm going to take my curved ruler, and again, you could use your curved ruler to do this too. But basically what I'm doing is starting here, so you guys can see, and going out there and coming right back in. Okay, so I'm coming here, going out that little bit there, and going back into my dart. So I'm not changing the amount of the dart, I'm changing the shape of the dart. Okay, just changing the shape of the dart. All right, so if I do, I like to do it by hand, but once I do, then I like to go back in and true up my lines here, make them nice. Okay. Now, if we are doing a custom pattern where we have a client or we've taken our own measurements and we're drafting for ourselves, then what we want to do is make sure we take advantage of being able to apply custom measurements, okay? Like the little special things that we can do that you wouldn't find if you got a garment that was made in a store, that was made that was ready to wear. All right, so now I've got my darts contoured, and now it's time for me to continue my work on the front and the back. So let's label our pattern. This is the front. And this is the back. All right. So in the on my back pattern, I'm going to measure down from the top of my draft just so that I can shape my pattern. I'm going to come down just 1/4 inch right here. Okay, and then I'm going to come here and I'm going up just 1/4 inch. Again, this is trying to, our waists don't go straight across. We're not made like that. We have shape, right? So that's all I'm doing, is doing little things to make this more contoured or dimensional so that it can fit a real human body. So I'm going up 1/4 of an inch here, but I'm not going here, okay? All right. Again, this actual measurement, if you were doing a custom fit, you would measure from the hip in the center back to the waist, and on the front you would measure from the hip up to the waist, and there would most likely on a human body would be some type of difference, okay? If you measure from at the side seam up to the hip, most likely it would be a difference, okay? So something you can do just is to make sure that you take those measurements, from the hip to the center back waist, from the hip to the center front at the waist, from the side seam up to the side waist, so you can get even more custom fit, okay? So now I'm going to go ahead and put in my shape here. So I'm going to this dart here, and I'm trying to get here. There we go. So take my pull the draft down so you guys can see it. Okay, I'm going to use my hip curve this time and just try to make a nice little curve there. Alright, to my dart, and I'm going to keep it going and go right up here to that 1/4 of an inch, okay? Alright, and I'm going to do the same thing in the front, okay? So our skirt is starting to look more like it could fit on a body with curves than it would on as it is on this flat paper. Okay, get in there and go right up and meet that there. All right, so the next thing we need to do, as we do with all of our patterns, is go ahead and put in our grain line. Okay, put one on the front, on the back, and one on the front, and our pattern is done. Okay, so this is just a quick, easy, basic way to make a pattern. Now, you know, basically it's just a fitted pencil skirt, okay, but you'll notice no pockets, nothing except the bare necessities, which would be what it would need in order for it to be able to fit. So from this pattern we can make flared skirts, we can make by adding fullness, we can make drop waist skirts, skirt with a yoke, skirt wider at the bottom. We can make anything we want to. We start off with this basic foundation piece here, and whatever we make using this will fit the size 8. Okay, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and put myself some notches here on the side to help match up my pattern pieces. I'll put some information here. This is a size 8, okay, and you need to cut 2. Whenever I'm doing a fitting pattern or a pattern that I made or drafted, I always like to leave a seam up the back and up the front for the fitting, for the first fit. Even if the design is not going to have a seam there, I do that so that I have some seam allowance here to make this test pattern fit even better, okay? So I have some seam allowance here at the side, and I have seam allowance at the front. If it's cut on the fold, then I don't have that, right? Okay, so same thing here. This is a size 8. We're going to be cutting 2, and there is no seam allowance added. Okay, no seam allowance added. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and cut my pattern out, because I'm going to use this same pattern, this foundation piece, to draft a basic sloper for pants. For a size 8. So because I took the measurements for the size 8 with the hip measurement, the waist measurement, and the right dart intake, if I don't change any of that, this pattern is going to fit anything that I make for a size 8, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out, and then I'll come back and I will show you guys a way to make pants using the skirt pattern. All right.